Brought to you by BedroomBattlefields.com. This is the Tabletop Miniature Hobby Podcast. Welcome to the podcasting, Callum.
Thanks for having me on. It's great to be here, Matthew.
So we were both at Tabletop Scotland, but we didn't actually sync up. I didn't realise until the last minute that you were going to be there, and I was only making a flying visit. So I did hear that you did a wee... Well, before I get to the painting tutorial thing, how did you find the event in general?
I had a great time. Went along with my wife, and she's into like RPGs and board games, but she'd done a little bit of painting with me, but not a lot. And I think the painting tutorial particularly was good for her because it was good to see other people who are, not necessarily amazing painters, because, you go on the internet and you see all these stunning paint jobs. And I think a lot of people at her level are a bit like, oh, I'm never going to be able to do that. And it's not about being able to do that. It's, if you want to be that good, you'll spend years trying to do it and maybe get close. But it was good. We went around the stalls, spent too much money on nonsense, as you're meant to at these things, I suppose. But what about yourself? We bought a few board games, got a couple of got an Asterix board game to maybe play with my daughter at some point, and a Doctor Who board game to play with my wife because she's mad for Doctor Who. And we got a copy of Root, which the guy in the stall was given the very heavy sell on, and my wife succumbed to it. But it looks like fun. I think he described it as Risk mixed with Redwall. So
good. I liked the Redwall books. Yeah, I read them all. I'm looking forward to getting my daughter into them in the future. I might still have a copy or two. That's why I got really into, well, just because they're brilliant miniatures anyway, but the Oathsworn ones, the Burrows and Badgers miniatures, have you come across them before?
I think I have seen them. I think I heard you talk about them on the podcast and went and had a look. It's not the kind of thing I go for, but I have actually considered getting that kind of thing for my daughter because she sees me painting stuff and she goes, can I paint a cat, Daddy? And I was like, I'm sorry, I've just got a giant mutant lobster. Do you want to have a go with that?
What age is your daughter?
She's 3, so I kind of,
year older than mine.
Yeah, I knew they were close. I wasn't sure exactly, but yeah. So she's just kind of getting quite intrigued by watching Daddy with his little men.
Yeah.
She asked me to do some pink ones, so I've got a unit of Thousand Sons is next on my list to do. Not Thousand Sons, Emperor's Children, silly me. So perfect for a 3-year-old.
So. My knowledge of the Space Marine chapters is limited, so I might well. I know I'm colourblind, so you could tell me a Dark Angel is pink, and I'd believe you. But yeah, a nice scene charm, that would work, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, I think these guys are Slanesh, but they're bright pink with kind of, I'm going to do animal prints on random bits of armour and stuff like that. Have fun, do it proper old school. Like, do you remember the old Noise Marine? The actual old one with the guitar and stuff, and
brilliant.
The original paint scheme on him. I think I'm going to pick up a few bits of that and just apply it across. I've only got maybe about a dozen guys or something that I'm going to do and can have them as a little war band for playing kind of small scale skirmish games with. So that's the plan. if I ever get them done, we'll see.
Yeah. So you did get a wee painting tutorial then. Like, what made you do that?
Well, like I say, partly for my wife and partly for myself because, like yourself, I left the hobby for like 2 decades. And I've kind of been coming back into it by myself and just doing my own little thing. And I've kind of got to the stage where I'm like, I really should try and find other people who are interested to this to talk to rather than just boring my friends and family with just me prattling on. Have you seen this little man I've got? He's amazing. Look, I did this and I did that, and this is all the stuff about him. And they're just like, yeah, yes, thanks. Yeah, So But I went along and I wanted to have a go and have someone show me how to paint a bit, because I'm well out of practice after 20 years, and I've done a few bits myself, but it was just good to do it. And something to pass an hour or so at Tabletop Scotland as well, while we were waiting for to do an RPG.
So what kind of things did you get shown? Like, was the miniature, like, did you have to bring a miniature, or was that provided? Or
that was provided. Basically, they give you they put about 20 primed random miniatures on the table, and said pick one. And I spotted a goblin with a spear and went, "Ooh, that looks good." And then just a hand reached in and grabbed it just as I was about to. So I was like, "Okay, fine, cowboy. Yeah, I've never painted a cowboy before. Let's do something different." But yeah, they just showed you. It's just the basic stuff, blocking out the colours for the base coat, and then using a wash. I think they used just like a single wash. I can't remember what it's called. I think it's called like Dark Tone or something like that. It was Army Painter. Never used any Army Painter paints before. I was quite impressed with them, actually. They were quite good. So give it a wash, and then just saying to like kind of go over some of the areas again and do a bit of highlighting and stuff. And there was loads of people at different levels doing the painting competitions, not competition, so the painting lesson. So it was kind of just kind of everyone to their own, and the guys were coming round and saying, "Oh, that's good. Have you tried doing this?" And my wife found it really useful, and it was just quite nice to have a bit of a refresher, and inspired me to come home and do lots more painting, which is nice.
Do you get much gaming time now?
I a little bit every now and then. I don't really have many people. I don't really know anyone to play with, to be honest, apart from my wife. And I need to try and find a club or something. But I think I'm in Glasgow, and it seems to be pretty devoid of anyone. There's a few like kind of historical wargaming things, but I'm just worried I'll go along and they'll look at my little green men and go, "What's this?" No. So but I played a game with my wife last night. Someone on the Discord had suggested Squad Hammer Core. It's like a narrative kind of tabletop thing that you very miniatures agnostic, really easy to set up, really simple rules, great for someone who doesn't want to sit down and read the Warhammer 40k rulebook, because to be honest, I'm not sure I even really want to do that. So we got it set up in about 20 minutes, including writing out what everybody was in the armies, and you can just make it up. So it was good for her, because she didn't need to go, "What are these guys to me?" I just go, "Well, what are they to you?" And then we'll just say, here, we'll just go, "Well, they've got big guns, so they've got high-powered weapons, and these ones have got big, long rifles, so we'll make them super accurate, and things like that." These had some Ogrins, and I was like, they look bloodthirsty, don't they? They like get in a combat and really mess things up. They got butchered in one turn of combat by some orcs. So, but nevertheless, so you just circle their bloodthirsty, and it just gives you little bonuses, and really great. I think if I'm going to try and introduce anyone else I know to tabletop wargaming, I think I'm going to pull that out again, because particularly that you don't have to explain things; they can just tell you what they want. Really, really great, because it's not overwhelming to hear like, you've got Admech. They come from the Forge Worlds of Mars, and you go off on this big ramble, and they just zone out.
So what's the game called again?
It's called Squad Hammer Core.
It's like 3 different game names just mashed together, isn't it?
I think it was. I picked up off the War Games vault, and I think it's by a chap called Ivan Sorensen. I think it's the same guy that did 5 Leagues from the Borderland and 5 Parsecs from Home. Yeah. Which you might have heard of. And it, like I say, it was just someone on the Discord for this podcast just mentioned it, and I just went, "Ooh, great! I'll go have a look." And got myself a copy, and within a few hours of getting a copy of the rules, I had a game on the table, and it worked really well.
It'd be interesting then to go back in time a bit and hear about, I mean, we're talking about these days, but what about your kind of origins in the hobby? Like, how did you first encounter miniatures and painting and gaming?
I grew up in the kind of far-flung north of Scotland on what a few hundred years ago was the edge of the world. And my brother was collecting these little men. I was in primary school, so I'd have been 7 or 8, and he had all these white dwarves and these little guys, and he painted them beautifully. I remember some of his stuff, actually, because I inherited it, and that was, he basically just went, he got to his late teens and went, I've discovered other things that are more interesting. Here, little brother, have these. And I was like, oh, cool, great, yeah, oh, what are these? And so I started reading all these old copies of White Dwarf that he'd given me from like the late 80s and early 90s. And I just had a whole load of like night goblins and some, I can't remember now, they said some high elves. I was like, what do I do? And I had no idea what I was doing. But I still loved them all, and I had a go at painting, but as you are when you're like 9, you like splodge on with the paint. And then we moved down to the south of Scotland, and I met other people my age who played these games. And we started going to the nearest Games Workshop to us was Carlisle. So I'd go to Carlisle on the train. I was about 11 or 12, and me and my mates were just given, here's your train fare and here's some money to get some chips for lunch. Go on a 1-hour train journey to the big city by yourselves, which just seems insane to me these days. That my parents were just like, oh, that's fine, go for it. And every Saturday, I'd just spend the day at Games Workshop making the red shirts' life a living hell. And buying absolute nonsense and painting and playing battles, and that was kind of where it began for me. And I would say I haven't looked back since, but the previously mentioned 20-year gap would say otherwise.
So when you were younger, like what like armies did you collect and stuff, or was it just a mishmash of things you thought were cool?
There was a lot of it was just a mishmash of things. Looking back on what I had then, every now and then a memory will surface when I'm going through eBay, and I'll see like some Dogs of War. I'll be like, oh, I had then, and then I'll look at the price of them on eBay and go, God, I should not have got rid of those. I basically bought, a lot of what I bought was just what I thought was cool. I loved painting. Well, yeah, a lot of my hobby is like painting and crafting. I really, really love that part of the hobby. I can just sit by myself for an hour of an evening, just taking things out of my brain and making them happen in front of my eyes, which I absolutely love doing. This was the reasons I like 28mm, is because you can add all those details and you can get noodly and paint it. Anyway, you asked about what I collected. I had a huge fantasy orc and goblin army, because that was what I started with my brother's night goblins. I think he had from, do you remember the Warhammer Fantasy starter set that had all the high elves and all the orcs and just all the goblins, all those ranks of spearmen that you don't want to sit on. Mm-hmm. I had a load of those. I think I had that box set. My brother had that box set. One of my mates had it. So I ended up with like 50, 60 of these goblin spearmen. And I always put them in one unit and just marched them across the middle of the table. So you're not taking these guys out before they get to you. But I had Space Orcs, love Space Orcs. I've been recreating my Blood Axe Warboss from my memory, the one that I had as a teenager. I've been making a new version of him to enter into a painting competition over on the Warhammer 40k community on Lemmy. That's actually next week, so I've got a few little bits of stuff to finish on him. Had a Space Force army.
What do you mean making them? Like scratch building?
Sort of, yeah. I like doing 3D printing, and through work, I've got history in 3D modeling. But what I did with him was I got loads of models that people had created online and had put online to sell or put online for free. And I took them and I put them in a program and I started chopping them up like you would a plastic kit. But just in the virtual space. And I mashed them together and then I 3D printed that. And then I covered about probably 30-40% of that in green stuff to do all the details that I didn't have the talent to do in 3D. And yeah, because that's what I'd done back in the day. I'd got like an orc mega knob and made him taller and made him put a engine off a 2CV kit, Citroen 2CV engine on his back to make him look bigger and things like that I just had in a random kit. And then I'd sculpted these enormous epaulets, ridiculously big epaulets onto his shoulder. I bought the model, the old metal model of Commissar Yarrick. I bought that and hacksawed his hat off and then glued it on my Warboss. And my parents were like, you just bought that model and you just come home and just jammed it in a vise. And I went, yeah, but my Warboss needed a hat. It's a bit easier these days with technology. Yeah, I love 3D printing things because it just lets me take things out, like I said, straight out of my head and make them reality. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I made him and I painted him, and then I treated myself to one of the little squigs that my brother had given me I had to buy another one because I don't have the originals anymore, but I bought this little squig with his tongue sticking out and stuck him on the base as an attack squig. He also gives the base a nice bit of weight because he's obviously a lump of lead. Mm-hmm. So but yeah, no, I'm very much into making my own things and crafting my own things and having stuff that's different to everyone else's. Mm-hmm. So,
when did you kind of drift out the hobby then? When would that have been?
Same kind of period a lot of people do, kind of late teenager, early 20s, drinking, nights out, many other distractions, and you just go, I don't have the time for this. I've moved on from this. I'm not a child anymore. And then and I literally sold boxes and boxes of stuff for beer money. Mm-hmm. For so little. I actually heard that the guy I sold it to was a friend of a friend. And I sold it to him mainly because he was like really interested in some of the stuff I'd had. And when I was talking to him and I was like, well, at least it's going to a good home. He took it home and he had a fiance and he had to hide it in his car and bring it in a little bit at a time. Because when he agreed to buy it off me, he didn't realize quite how much stuff I had in the cupboard as well. And he was just like, I've just filled the boot of my car with boxes. I can't just walk into my house with this. My fiance will go nuts. And so he was just bringing in a little bit and hoping she wouldn't notice. So it's like, yeah.
Like the boy in the Shawshank Redemption with a bit tunnel. He was digging the tunnel. He was just letting a wee bit out every day, like just a couple of minutes every day.
Yeah. I just imagine a few goblins coming out the bottom of his trousers going, oh, where did they come from? I'll just put those up on the shelf.
So when are we talking then? Like how many years ago was that when you sold up everything?
It'd be like 2003, 2004, somewhere around there, I think. I don't know. There's as I say, a lot of drinking happened since then, so memory's a bit hazy. And
then during like when you were out of it all, but like before we get to you coming back in, were there any wee moments where you gave it a bit of thought, or read any books, or just went into a Games Workshop for a wee look at any point?
Yeah. I still like reading some of the novels. I remember reading like Gotrek and Felix and the Gaunt's Ghost novels when they came out I think it was the late 90s. Actually, Gotrek and Felix was probably the early 90s when they started, and really enjoyed them. So I had actually already picked up like one of the big omnibuses of Gotrek and Felix and been like, read this again. And they're I find them to be great books. They're really easy to read, and maybe the first two maybe a bit, not so well structured, but by the time you hit the third one and going forwards to certainly until William King, I think he wrote the first 8 of them. Certainly until then, he was doing pretty good kind of continuous storyline with a good Skaven villain and things like that. But yeah, and my first experience, the only experience I really had of going into Games Workshop during that was when we started playing Dungeons and Dragons, probably about kind of 2017, 2018. And I was running a campaign, and I had this city full of dwarves, and I needed some guards because the dwarves were going to cause trouble for the party. So I was like, I'll just go down to Games Workshop and I'll buy a box of dwarf infantry. I'll be able to, I remember what dwarf infantry was like from Games Workshop. I'll go get that, and I'll be able to make some great city guards just out of a little simple infantry box set. And I walked in, and I was confronted by the Age of Sigmar for the first time, and I was like, "What is this? Why? I just want a box of infantry." And I went and asked the guy, and he was like, "Oh no, we don't really do just a box of dwarf infantry." And I'm like, he tried to sell me some other stuff, but I wasn't interested. I think I actually ended up buying a box off of for Kings of War, and they were great. Yeah, it's exactly what I was after. So
were you think you were going to get a wee nice monopose box? Like, I can't even remember what the dwarven monopose ones were. But
I remember the ones with the axes above their heads and the little shields, and you got the different kind of patterns on the shields and stuff, so you can choose. I was hoping something for more kind of the late 90s kits, like kind of. I know you're into your monopose, and I do appreciate a nice monopose regiment in Warhammer. The goblins from the start set with all the spears that I was talking about. I've actually picked up a few of those myself, and at some point I'm going to get round to painting them. But no, I like being able to pose guys. I like my guys to look different. So these kind of separate arms and separate legs and separate heads, it's great for me. And then you can stick a bit of green stuff in the joints and really get some articulation and have them pointing all over the place. So I think I don't know if you saw, I did some Terminators, some of the old. Do you remember the old metal Chaos Terminators?
Yeah.
And I got some green stuff in the armpits to stop them from being that kind of arms tightly by their side pose.
Yeah.
To make them kind of much more dynamic.
Yeah.
So
he won't get through many doors like that, though, will he?
Oh, he just tuck his arms in for that, right?
So, you said you started playing D&D. So was that a catalyst then to come back into the hobby fully?
I think it was actually talking to one of the guys who I was playing the D&D with. He bought some new miniatures from Games Workshop, and we were just chatting about them, and I think it was a box of Chaos Space Marines, and I was disappointed to find that you had to put them together in a certain way. I was like, oh, they come in parts, great. You can pose them all sorts of ways, but actually they're basically difficult to put together monopose models. It's the worst of both worlds in my head. But yeah, I think what got me kind of particularly back interested was I picked up a copy of the Mordheim rulebook from Oxfam for a good price, and I just started looking through it, and I went, I've got all these D&D miniatures that I've made, and then I made a whole load of ruins out of Lego. I dug a whole load of Lego out of the cupboard and made a ruined city. And then made my wife have a game of Mordheim, which is not the gentlest introduction to tabletop wargaming, but she seemed to have a good time. Didn't cry about it, at least, and it kind of just reminded me what I liked, like making the terrain out of Lego. I was just suddenly like, oh, this is great. I just was like, I was looking at these pieces and I went, well, this is perfect for making an enormous ruined church, and this could make a wizard's tower and things like that. And it just, my brain started doing what it did when I was a teenager. And suddenly I've got 1,000,001 projects, none of which ever seem like they're ever going to be finished. But
how did you work with the Lego? Did you use the Lego as like almost a scaffolding and put materials on it, or was it just naked Lego?
I made some quite convincing ruins completely out of Lego, like they were a Lego kit, because I wanted to put the Lego back in the box afterwards and use it again. So, and then I started making my own Mordheim scenery a little bit. It's all right. Looks good enough, but again, my brain flitted off to decide to do something else. So I've got like 4 or 5 ruined buildings in various states of finish. I finished 1 or 2 of them, but then I was like, oh no, I should play something different. I should go do this. I should go do that. And I'm lucky I have a very understanding wife. So
how are you set for like storage? Because obviously terrain could be a problem with storage, and it could be quite bulky.
Yeah, we got to the point where my wife said, you need to do something about all this stuff, because I was talking about buying even more things. And she went, right, I don't mind you buying this. That's fine. It obviously makes you very happy, but we've nowhere to keep it. So I actually I made a wall of shelves, which is kind of where I'm sitting now, and it is just full of miniatures and rule books and codexes. I love codexes. I like reading that kind of very kind of little bite-sized chunks of lore that you get in codexes, and out-of-date codexes are really cheap, because most people aren't interested in them, but I'm not interested in necessarily using the rules. I'm interested in just reading the lore. So actually, I think I got a load of the 5th edition ones were quite good, but obviously they're quite out of date now. I think they were back kind of 2005, 2006 or something. And so I've got a few of the later edition ones and things like that. And I just sit and read them and just absorb it all. And then, yeah. The thing about, I'm not too bothered about playing Warhammer 40k or necessarily Warhammer Fantasy as a game, but particularly with 40k, the lore and that universe they created, possibly up until they decided to drop Primaris Marines into it, because I'm an old man and stuck in my ways. I love it. It's great. I love this idea that there's a universe that is not going to get any better. There is not a light at the end of the tunnel. 10,000 years ago, everything went wrong, and and it's just getting worse and worse. I like that kind of relentlessly dark tone to it. But I liked it with the kind of silly humor that they injected into it in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And I like that kind of second edition color palette. I like the idea that it's grim and it's dark, but it's also bright and vibrant in its own way. And so I like reading the lore. So yeah, so I've got all this storage, and it's just, I'm going to have to make more soon if I'm not careful. So I've kind of put a stop on buying anything at the moment.
Get a storage locker. Imagine that one. I used to watch that. When I stayed with my pal, we used to watch that Storage Wars where they cracked open the storage lockers. Imagine on that, it's just like, £100,000 worth of 90s Games Workshop stuff. And nobody realises the value.
I have dreams like that. I'm not even joking. My wife laughed at me once because I woke up and I was like, oh. She's like, what's wrong? And she was like, I just dreamt I was in a toy shop and they had loads of 90s Warhammer and they hadn't changed the prices.
Some old senile shopkeeper.
Yeah, just left them on the shelf. No one had ever bought them. I turned up and I had my credit card and I was going to clear them out. assuring my wife that I'll make a fortune selling these on eBay and not just hoard them all for myself.
So what are you all got on the go at the moment in terms of projects? What are you working on? What are you really excited about? And what are you getting distracted with?
I'm just finishing up my Warboss. He's got a few little bits and pieces to go. He's quite happy there. So
Chunky
hopefully,
guy.
yeah. Well, he's not as he's not too big because I'm going more towards the kind of if I ever play any real Warhammer, it'll probably be back to 3rd edition, which was kind of what I last played. But yeah, no. So I'm just finishing him off, which has really been a kind of good little journey for me because he's been on the go since first inception for about a year and a half, I think.
Is he a Citadel one or a proxy or like?
Oh no, that's the one. That's the one that I made. So that's
right.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So you see the attack squig on the bottom is a Citadel miniature, but
that looks tremendous.
Everything else is like, so all the like medals on his chest are hand sculpted, and the big epaulets and the flames, and I actually hand sculpted the checker pattern onto his fist.
Bloody hell!
Rather than that, actually easier than painting it. Because with green stuff, you can lay it out and you just chop squares up, and then you just got to pop them on, and then it's really easy to paint. But it looks even better than just painting it. And so, not that I mind painting checker patterns. I was collecting Warhammer 40k in the 90s. It was all checker patterns everywhere. Checker patterns and yellow and black stripes on everything. So finish them up, and then like I say, I think my next job will be doing these Emperor's Children that my daughter requested. I've got a few old metal models that I picked up off eBay in various little bits and pieces, and going to paint them all bright pink. I think actually I bought a pot of pink paint. I think it's described as fuchsia. There's nothing more grimdark than a few fuchsia space marines coming to get you.
Yeah.
So, yeah. What about yourself? Have you been working on anything recently? I was listening to a few of your old episodes this week, and you were mentioning 6mm stuff, but I don't think I've ever seen any of that.
No, I put that on the back burner because I got into 15, so I'm all over the place as well. So I've got a massive amount of 15mm to start working on, but the latest thing I've been getting a wee warband of goblins finished. I got them from Nightmare. I don't know if you've come across Nightmare before. I
do, yeah. They're very, very good.
Aye, I'll be putting photos up. They're very nearly finished now, but I'll be putting pictures of them up when they're ready. I've really enjoyed them, actually. I think they were all Kev Adams, and some of them potentially like the best character full miniatures I've ever painted. Just like nice big areas, but depth and character, and the faces are tremendous. So, I really, really good miniatures. Those
Kev Adams orcs in my head are just the best.
Yeah,
best orcs. It's what all orcs, whether it's fantasy or 40k or whatever, Kev Adams, he gets that aesthetic that it's just really pleasing. I was looking at some of the more modern stuff on 40k where it's starting to look quite realistic and kind of, you can tell someone's done a course in anatomy when they've been designing it, kind of thing. And I'm just like, hey, they're orcs. They're meant to be silly. They're meant to be nonsense. Give them a big jaw and some teeth sticking out of it and some scars and an eye patch. And, Gorfang Rockgut. I don't know if you remember that model.
I had him. Yeah, he had the sword over his head.
Exactly, that's the one. Yeah, he is. I think he's probably my favourite Kev Adams sculpt of an orc. Just completely nails it. The big toe caps on the boots and things like that. As you can probably tell from the Warboss that I showed you, you can see I'm somewhat inspired by the same kind of thing.
Yeah,
making him. So it's a great choice in miniatures by you. I mean, that's like I said, I can't say enough good things about Kev Adams. Goblins and orcs, just the master.
Yeah, I mean, he seems to still saying he seems to still get work is the wrong term. He seems to still do work, which is cool. He pops up in different places, and he's obviously doing commissions for folks. So I think
I saw a thing about him on Bring Out Your Lead, where I wasn't there, but I watched one of these videos of it, and he was live sculpting orc faces for people.
Really?
It was just sitting in the corner, just sculpting. Yeah. I would have just spent the entire day sitting watching him.
I know. That'd be just so surreal to see. I mean, all the household names from the 90s and that we grew up with, and even like having privilege to have a few of them on the podcast so far, and that's not in person, but you're still having a conversation with them, and you kind of, I've had it a few times now where I get a moment of clarity where I'm like sitting talking to Andy Chambers. I'm like, I'm talking to Andy Chambers. I'm asking him questions and he's responding. This is weird. It's like, and they're so nice, all of them. But to actually go to an event like that, and like spoke about with Jason, and you can have like John Blanche in the room, if you saw Kev Adams sitting sculpting orcs, it'd just be, I don't know what, I'd probably just have to go, because I wouldn't be able to accept it. I wouldn't be worthy enough.
No. Even the thought of just being interviewed by a man who has interviewed Andy Chambers, Gab Thorpe, and Thomas Sheridan is
really low level happiness.
It panicked me. If you had told teenage me that I would be on the same kind of lineup of interviews, kind of thing, do you know what I mean? Like, I know it's not the same, but it would have just blown my little mind. I was like, oh, so yeah. No, it's a privilege to be following them up. It's a hard act to follow. So,
it's a great hobby in the sense that I don't know that there's anyone out there that's as famous or talented as people are in the hobby. I don't know that you'll find many people who are aloof and feel that they're above getting involved in things like this and going to events and interacting with people. So it's really cool that.
I think a lot of these people they're into the hobby themselves. They want to be involved.
Yeah,
the reality is they're just like us, but they were the people doing it, and so we kind of look at them and go, wow, but they just want to play games, they want to paint miniatures, they want to share the love of the hobby, and yeah, that's what I want to do.
You got any old white dwarfs for back in the day, or did you get rid of them too?
I did get rid of those, yeah. I think the only thing that I have from back in the day is actually at my dad's, and it was when Lord of the Rings miniatures first started coming out. I don't know if he was like free on the front of a white dwarf or something, but there was a Bilbo holding the ring in the palm of his hand, holding a book. And I painted this up really nicely, and I gave it to my dad as a present. So it was the only thing that was spared the culling. But I have actually not white dwarfs. I decided not to buy any old copies of white dwarfs because it was just like, that way I don't have the storage for what I've got, so I don't need 100 copies of White Dwarf as well, much as that would be great. I have picked up a few copies of the Citadel Journal, though, which I remember really enjoying. It was a bit of like, it was for the proper nerds of 40k back in the day. The White Dwarf was for the casual players, and then you had the ones who was like, now I want to have a Gene Stealer cult army, so I need to get the rules out of the Citadel Journal. And
yeah,
I found it amazing. I was looking at the back, and you got like, do you remember Doc Butcher's clinic at the back, where Games Workshop would sell you kits to make conversions? And so in the back, the pages, they'd be like, here's some nice conversions some people at Games Workshop made, and here's all the parts list, so you can just buy the parts to make them yourself. And then you look at modern day Games Workshop, and you're just like, they would never do that.
Mm-hmm.
They're just like, no, if you want that gun holster, you buy the whole box.
Yeah.
Buy it.
Yeah. In the late 90s, they really pushed that, didn't they? They were like, they were saying like, and that was at a time as well where it was like write in or phone in or that. It wasn't, online quite yet.
Yeah.
But it was
fill in
like,
the form.
you could phone us and get this gun. You think of like the labour involved and the electricity cost versus like the price of the tiny gun, but it just showed that they knew that, you know, this very small sale that is a net loss is, you know, somebody's buying into the company and the lore, and they'll hopefully go on to buy more stuff.
And I remember being asked what I wanted for my birthday one year, and I had. Did you remember the old brightly coloured catalogues from like 1991? There was like a blue one and a red one and a green one.
Yeah, they were like heroin for the eyes, weren't they? Just like
exactly.
You
yeah,
just sit and drink them in.
And I pored over these for ages and ages and ages, and I had my Space Wolf army, and I was like, "There's a model of Lehman Russ in here. There's a model of Lehman Russ with Frecky and Gary as wolves." It's from like 88 or something. It's like really early Rogue Trader model. And so my dad phoned up Games Workshop and said, "Are you still manufacturing this?" And they went, "No, and we don't have any in stock. But if you want to pay, like, in the time it's probably like 20, 30 quid, we will do a casting and you can have one of them." So and like, so they're like, we'll dig out the molds and we'll send you them. And my dad was like, "Are you sure?" Because back then 20, 30 quid was quite a lot of money. And my dad was like, "Are you sure this is what you want for your birthday?" And I was like, yes. And so yeah, that's another miniature that I'm sad.
So did that happen? They cast it for you? Yeah.
So I think they had to do like a minimum of like a dozen of him.
Yeah.
But they just kept the rest for any other stupid children who were begging for the tiniest Space Marine they could find. Because even next to like the 3rd edition models, he was like 6 inches short of a normal. Well, in scale, he was a few mils short of a normal Space Marine. He's meant to be the Primarch.
Yeah.
But still, he was on the battlefield. He was my commander. For a good few years, beautifully painted and that kind of thing. So yeah, no, I love getting back into this now. It's nostalgia all the way for me. Mm-hmm, that's all it's about. I don't know if you saw. I've been recreating the 2nd edition starter set cardboard scenery for 40k.
Yeah.
In 3D and 3D printing them, and I've got a few pieces of it now, and it just I sit and look at it, and I'm just like, it's going to look so good.
Great stuff. Well, it's been really enjoyable to chat and get sort of caught up on where you're at the moment. We'll have to catch up again. I mean, we'll definitely catch up in person too. This is a small country, so we might as well.
Yeah, not a million miles away.
Get a wee game on the go at some point. It's a good excuse for me to get something done as well. So,
it'd be fantastic. Yeah.
So, what are you got any games lined up with your wife coming up, or will you just play it by ear?
Just play it by ear. We don't play very frequently. Every few months we'll get a game, and to be honest, it's not the end of the world from my point of view. Like I say, I love the crafting and the building and designing things in 3D and printing them off and things like that. So, and just buying old miniatures and never touching them because I've got too many other things to do. So,
anywhere you would like to send the millions of listeners to check out any of the stuff that you're up to?
Yeah, sure. You can find me on Mastodon. I'm one of these people who has decided that Twitter isn't a place to be. So I'm on Mastodon. You can find me at Dr. Spork, as in Spork.
Little plastic fork spoon hybrid.
Yeah.
You get in like prepackaged pastas and stuff.
Yeah. Dr. Spork at Warhammer.social on Mastodon. And I post up what I'm working on, and I post up if I design. Some of the stuff I design for 3D printing is on Cults 3D, so you can find me on there as well if you're interested in seeing the kind of retro models that I like to make. So
excellent.
I'll probably put the files for the 2nd edition scenery up on there when I'm done designing them as well. So if anybody wants a set of kind of real chunky second edition scenery. I'm sure there's at least 4 or 5 people out there who'll be interested.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm on your join the Discord for Bedroom Battlefields.
It's a place to be, isn't it? Place to be.
lots of really interesting folk on there. Like I say, I literally read about Squad Hammer Core maybe 48 hours ago, maybe not that long. Bought the rules, played a game, really enjoyed it. Would never have found it if I hadn't been on the Discord. So.
Thanks very much for listening to this episode of the Tabletop Miniature Hobby Podcast. If you enjoy the show, then please do share it with someone else you think might enjoy it too. And be sure to check out our Discord community of like-minded hobbyists, which you could find at bedroombattlefields.com/Discord. It'd be great to see you in there.